On today's episode of the Sales Factor Podcast, we have Matt Champion. He is a sales engineering leader with expertise in customer success and SaaS sales, and over 8 years experience leading sales engineering teams in organizations. Now, his mission is to deliver value-driven solutions that help clients improve their customer loyalty, their retention, and revenue. He has a proven record of achieving and exceeding sales targets and empowers mentors his team to develop their technical and sales capabilities to grow and shape their careers. So, super excited to have him on the show. Let's get into it. Matt, what is the biggest challenge or the biggest problem in sales you're finding right now?
It's a good question, as everyone says, and I do struggle with it because it can be a moving target based on lots of different factors, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, I come from this from a different angle, as obviously I'm a
Mm.
sales engineer, and I kind of accidentally fell into sales as well. So my perspective, as I said, will be a bit different. I'm not out there, hammering the phones, doing outreach over email, etc. So for where I'm sitting, obviously the kind of biggest factor is the environment we're selling in. That's like the
Mm.
macroeconomic kind of social climate. I don't know about you, but I'm tired of hearing about unprecedented times kind of layering themselves over each other, right? But
Yeah.
kind of ultimately from a more targeted perspective, I guess, from the conversation we're having, I believe it boils down to connecting value, to a problem and then to a product and solution, which I do understand is sales engineering 101.
Yeah.
But to kind of go a bit further than that, perhaps we've lost some of the personal touch in selling. It could be down to a lot of different factors. I think one of the greatest would be the general saturation within our marketplace when we talk about SaaS sales as a whole. There's lots of different types of technology you can buy for lots of different reasons. Some of it being like luxury tech, which you don't necessarily need. It can optimize your process. So when you're looking at potentially kind of engineering focused software, that's a bit more tangible when it comes to ROI, when it comes to actual time saving, for example. But the lines can become a bit blurred when you start to look into, as I said, stuff that you don't necessarily need for your day to day, but it will optimize and kind of improve your process overall.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like that little shiny toy that we all want to play, and every company out there wants the biggest, the best, different tech, and there's hundreds of different SaaS solutions, right?
Exactly.
It's about I guess picking the right one that's best for the solution. And I love what you said, falling into sales. Do you know what? I don't know if I've ever came across someone that hasn't fallen into sales.
Yeah, true.
It's the same with recruitment. Like we fall into recruitment, but yeah, you mentioned a few things there that really piqued my curiosity around, driving value. Yes. Is the personal touch been lost in, I guess, the art of sales? So give us a bit more context into around that. Like why do you feel that it is such a saturated market and people are driving products down the throat, and why you think they've lost the personal touch?
Sure. So in some respects, you can say it's a race to the bottom, I guess, where are people buying a well-engineered like landing page and a manicured pitch, and you turn up to a meeting with 10 different people all doing kind of like different parts of the sales process. And within that, you might, as I said, lose the personal touch. Like, do people still buy people? Kind of,
Mm,
that's ultimately it, right? When we talk about value, value is inherent. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So value is in the eye of the prospect. Everyone's going to come at it from a different angle. Um, so yeah, it's about kind of whether we overcomplicate this, I guess, to a large degree sometimes, or maybe they've hit the nail on the head by having these kind of like over-engineered kind of like cadences when say this happens, do this ROI calculator here, move into a POC, POV, opportunities closed, for example. So there is a nuance kind of like behind that, and kind of how you kind of structure that, and how you kind of perceive and actually engineer a deal itself, I guess. But it all boils down to identifying value, which again is a moving target depending on who you're talking to, industry, size of organization, obviously budget comes down to a lot of it. You could have the best value pitch in the world or value prop in the world, but if we pay for it, then it can just be like irrelevant, right?
Yeah, I think in sales, like in sales teams I've built and stuff, we always talk about the value for sure. Like we always, it's driven home every single day about, okay, we've got to provide value and show that, we identify the pain points people are going through and then how we solve it and demonstrating that through value so that people can really see, is this product, is this service, is this SaaS solution really for them? But would you say there's like fundamentals of what people should be thinking about when talking about value? And, is it really part of the sales process from start to finish, or is there certain periods throughout the process they should be demonstrating the value?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. It's a good way of looking at it. So I would suggest yes, value has to be at the forefront of every conversation you have. And again, taking a
Mm,
step back, value is kind of, it has somewhat become this arbitrary phrase, like,
mm.
find the
Yeah.
value. What is the value? Is like, I don't know, what do you even mean by the value, right? So it's about taking a step back, understanding, I guess, in essence, what you as a company solution product can deliver, looking at
Mm,
the issues that you have solved in the past. Everyone thinks they're different, and a lot of times there are slight variances in how people operate, depending on the
mm.
software you sell. But ultimately, I'd say kind of boils down to a handful of issues that you can solve. And it's
Yeah.
about obviously not wasting people's time, be it your time, be it the prospect's time. So value should be at the forefront of everything for sure, I think, because ultimately that's what we're here to do. We're here to, particularly in SaaS, right? It's a renewals game.
Mm.
It's about recurring revenue. So you need to make sure that whatever you're doing is resonating with the organization you're selling into, and ensuring that will continue to resonate through the course of your relationship with the customer.
Yeah, and value's great and providing value and talking about that. Yeah, I get it. But in the whole overarching, for talk's sake, the art of sales, right? It's not. I think value's driven home quite a lot in sales teams, where there's other elements of I guess the art of sales that people need to really look into and upskill in different areas. And you mentioned earlier about potentially the personal touch is being lost or maybe not being touched upon as much as this is our pain point, this is what we do, this is how we solve it. So how would you look at upskilling the personal side of teaching people how to really perfect the art of sales?
That's a great question. Um, if I had the proper answer, like a killer answer, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. I'll be off on an island somewhere,
Yeah.
exciting myself, right? Um, but ultimately, it's EQ and empathy, I guess, right? It's about
Yeah.
understanding. Again, back to this value phrase, or this
Mm,
value word. It's about understanding the inherent what that actually brings to people, right? So understanding that you solve a problem that someone may it may kind of kill someone's week, right? If you're doing the same thing over and over again, you have a solution that can solve that for them. You, as an individual who sells this product all the time, won't feel that pain because you have the solution that can solve it, right?
mm,
You have the silver bullet, I guess, to some degree, to actually improve this problem or resolve this problem for someone. So it's about understanding and kind of like delving into understanding what your product does, how you can deliver that value, and also kind of embracing that to a large degree.
mm,
Let's be honest, no one really, I mean, no one really wants to work that much, right? You'd rather be on the beach, as I said, but you have to do it, and you have to do it well. So it's about kind of like leaving that at the door to a large degree and understanding that you are someone's knight in shining armor, potentially, right, in order to solve this issue. And when you kind of like have that philosophy in the back of your mind, you're able to speak with passion about your product.
mm.
You're able to speak with passion about the problems that you're able to solve, and the kind of final kind of environment or kind of workflows that you can deliver to people to actually solve their issues, right?
Yeah, and I think I love what you said there about EQ and empathy because a couple questions come to mind. Like, can that be taught? For one,
Mm,
should that be in like the training program of how people demonstrate it or how what people should be looking at? Because again, we can talk about the product and all that sort of stuff to the end degree, but like you mentioned earlier, people buy from people, right? And
mhm,
demonstrating empathy and really getting under the bonnet, um, and understanding what they're going through for stories, through I guess that's where the real relationship comes with. Even here's the guy's name, Simon Sinek talks about, the why. People people know what you do and how you do it, but they really care about why you do it.
Mhm.
And I think if you can really maximize the learnings of EQ and empathy with your prospects, I think you'll get even further because the product's going to be the same. Obviously, there's going to be new versions of it and that added stuff to it, which obviously is the pain points and that's all the value and that's great and people get it. But if you can really, I guess, demonstrate that empathy. But the question is, like, do you feel that people just get it, or do you think there has to be an element of training for people to really understand, EQ and empathy with going out to prospects?
Yeah, so I know you had another guest on a previous podcast, which kind of like focused on sales training and that kind of stuff. So I
Yeah.
think to a large degree, it can be taught or can be learned and studied to a degree,
Mm,
right? But then it comes back to you get different levels of performing salespeople, right? So you get kind
mm,
of high performers down to like the lower end of the spectrum of performance. So we like within that kind of bracket, I think you would see different degrees of EQ, empathy, etc. But I
mm,
think it can be taught to a degree, but obviously there is a ceiling to how far you can take that. But again, I think it also boils down to motivation of the individual. So if
yeah.
I'm a financially motivated individual that may not have necessarily all of the tangible skills that we're talking about, I can probably bridge that gap to a degree. So I can buy
Mm,
my new car or I can get my new watch, for example, right? Or
yeah.
some people aren't financially driven at all, right? I've worked with some salespeople who are very high performers that are just like middle of the road. They don't buy any flash cars, flash clothes, etc. So they're
Mm,
driven by something else, right? So that might be the EQ. It might just be being successful, for example. Quote unquote successful.
yeah.
So again, that is a moving target, and I know it's not probably the answer you're looking for, but I think yes, it can be taught to a large degree, but up to a point, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of the old fashioned on the job train, I believe, because someone coming in that potentially hasn't got a lot of experience in selling a product, service, whatever, um, might not be able to have that empathy because they haven't been through it before,
Hmm.
right? They can kind of get it and understand it, but will they be able to demonstrate it unless they've gone through the process and really got some tangible? So we used to do it way back when I first joined recruitment. It was quite hard for me to tell stories about because I hadn't been through placements and stuff. So I believe you can still demonstrate it through the wider team and understand what the team has done and talk from a team and company perspective rather than from an individual. But over time, I believe the empathy and stuff grows through training, through actually
Yeah,
doing the work.
just for exposure, right? I guess.
Yeah.
And again, it boils down to, well, not boils down to, I think it's reflected in, as I was talking about kind of initially with not one person, obviously one person owns the opportunity, that is the AE, but
Mm, mm,
behind the AE, there is sales engineer, there's SDR, BDR, there's a marketing department, there's an implementation team, there's sales enablement. So if you couple all of that together, then
mm.
as you said, learning on the job. I like that. You kind of just absorb stuff as a sponge, right? As you make mistakes, as you have successes, you kind of like fine tune that kind of I guess your EQ and the kind of value pitch and what you're actually focusing on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you a bit of a story. So before sales, so my first sales job was selling beds. So I used to sell like divan beds and frames and all that sort of stuff. And that was way back in 2008, 2009 in the crisis. That was
Yeah.
a nuts time, but everyone
Yeah.
needs a bed, right? So
Oh,
it was
apparently,
okay. And then when I moved to London, I got a job at Fujitsu, working as an EPOS engineer. So all the Marks and Spencers, all the boots, pretty much in the whole of the UK, I built the stores way back then, right?
right.
So in terms of the full EPOS systems, all the backend servers, all the wires, all the tests, and all that sort of stuff. But when I first joined, like I was good at IT, I was good at building computers and that sort of stuff because it was
Mm.
techie. But um, I learned everything and progressed quicker because it was on the job. I was working with the leader. I was watching him doing it and stuff like that.
Mm.
So if I do feel like on the job and doing it and side by side people like will get you. You can still have the fundamental um, you know theory training, which is fine. But I think you're going to get more EQ, empathy, and actually doing the job a
100%.
lot better by doing it. So talking about the art of sales, and I understand the value piece, I understand the personality piece and being personal and building on the empathy and stuff. Is in the whole overarching of the art of sales. Like, is there anything else you think is a piece that people need to focus on when going through their whole processes?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a case of immersion, I guess, to a large degree, like particularly when you're starting out, right? As we've just been discussing. So, you come with this kind of maybe wide-eyed, naive, well, I certainly did, naive perspective around sales and being like, it's going to be really cool. I'm going to be closing deals all the time. I'm going to be taking clients out for dinner and all this kind of fun stuff,
Right.
etc.
Yeah.
Then when you start to talk about the product with someone, particularly the first time, there's like a pitch. You're like, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about here. Actually, I'm just right? You're like, so it's about immersion, as I said. So it's about understanding number one, your product. That's first and foremost what you're selling. Your stakeholders, external and internal. So as I said, you've got that big raft of people behind you internally supporting you, be it through collateral, be it through pitches, demos, outreach, etc. Then also embracing your prospects. As I said, looking at your total addressable market, for example, what verticals are we looking at? What personas are we selling into? What do these individual people care about? And again, this kind of does all come back to value, but I think it is separate to some degree because value is, as I said, in the eye of the beholder. Whereas some of this is kind of tangential to that, I would say, right? So
Mm,
you can like throw your value pitch out, your value prop out constantly to people, and it will land or it won't land. But then there's also that additional element of, do I care about your value prop? Do I care about the issue that you have, right? How have we solved this in the past? Are you a kind of trusted advisor around what you're looking to sell here? So I've sold products before that are legally, like you legally have to have it to operate as an organization, and which
right.
is a very different sales pitch than this luxury software that I was just mentioning there, right? So it's about how you approach that, how you need to
Mm,
approach that, and again, how you articulate your product around that. So if it's compliance software, for example, you need this compliance software to operate, right? Otherwise, you can have a massive fine land on your desk.
we don't want
But
that.
we
We
never
don't
want
want that.
that. We don't want that. The beauties of GDPR.
Yeah.
With that, so do you want to avoid this massive fine? It's fairly easy to articulate ROI there, but then you've got the
Mm,
upsell on top of that for potentially additional products, or as I mentioned, the kind of luxury quote unquote pieces of software that will optimize your kind of organization. So within that, it's a very different conversation. It's obviously a lot of a slower burn, and it's about
mm.
understanding about when you need to kind of move the dial in terms of pressure or in terms of how you demonstrate the product.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of moving parts within it, like even the education piece of your ICP and making sure they
Mhm.
really understand what you do. And I think the way people buy now is a lot different than 5, 10 years ago, for sure. Right?
Mhm.
Scams or people's barriers are straight up when they get that cold call. So it's more about, and that's where I guess the personal branding, the marketing really has a play of how you drive in visibility to your ICP about what you do and how you do it. And then I feel that within, I guess, the art of sales, of that empathy, that EQ piece, really only comes through when you speak to the prospect.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, yes, don't get me wrong, it can probably be demonstrated through marketing efforts and stuff like that, which is great. But the amount of relationships I've got that I could send them emails and, value props and all that sort of stuff. But are they really going to get that, empathy from me and really truly build that relationship? Or if I met them or face to face or on the phone, they're probably likely to get a lot more um, of that side. But do you feel that that side's lost then? Do you feel that the personal side is lost, or is company still doing all of it, or are they just sort of segue in and just going value driven?
Yeah, I think to a degree it can be. I think with again looking at the saturation of the marketplace and kind
Yeah.
of that kind of brings a lot of extra kind of pressure around
Mm,
not being able to potentially create those relationships. I would suggest if you've got a target, you have target, be it for like financial target, be it a calling target, the amount of calls you make a day, for example, you can
mm,
leave some of that at the door because you need
mm,
to deliver these results, right? again, these results, or these targets are created for a reason. So there is kind of method behind the madness, of course. But
Yeah.
I'd also say the way that we do it potentially leads to a loss of that relationship, because this is a bit crazy for me to say as a technology-driven salesperson, but with the amount of technology we have at our disposal now to
Yeah.
do our jobs, we can lose some of that personal element. I think obviously there is there is an artful way that you can use these products. So by that I mean
Sure.
kind of Sales Loft, for example, not wanting to give them a shout out necessarily.
Yeah.
But creating like cadences that that you can email people through, like demo automation tools, for example, as well, which I think are fantastic. Being able to send a demo off to somebody, or like a wireframe that someone can click through, for example, to kind of envision how they can use the product, how it will fit
Yeah.
within their tech stack. They are invaluable. But I think you need to layer on top of that the relationship side of the fence, particularly when we're talking about the renewals game and the SaaS game, which is
Mm,
why customer success managers, account managers are just so valuable at the moment
yeah.
nowadays, right? So you could say that the relationship bit has been transplanted or taken away from the initial kind of front end new business piece to the install base, ensuring that we are number one, keeping the promises that we made in the sales process, and then two, ensuring that we are actually like optimizing and delivering that value to people through the course of our engagement.
Yeah, key point there that you definitely made, because I've definitely been in it where everyone's focused on top of funnel, getting people in, pipeline generation, getting people into the process, doing deals. And I've definitely been in it where we didn't really focus heavy on renewals, or yeah, yes, they were in, they were using the product, they were getting fantastic results, and everything was great, but the relationship went kind of like downwards because we didn't really have that element of customer success, or that element of really building that relationship, check-in points, making sure there's no issues, etc. So when it came to renewal, we were down 70%, and we were then constantly just funneling in marketing, more marketing efforts, more webinars, more
Right.
stuff to get people into it, which is great. But if the revenue generator from services for renewals is massive,
Yeah.
which again, from account management and customer success, is huge.
Yeah.
um one of the things I was going to ask then to you, like, what would you define as I guess, the core fundamentals of a salesperson that becomes a good salesperson?
Yeah, so obviously we've spoken about like the empathy and the EQ side of the fence, and that's kind of obvious, I guess, to a large degree, particularly when you're looking from an outside perspective. Um, Obviously, 101 is predictable business pipeline. You need to be able to demonstrate that you're able to deliver. This is a results driven game. You can't not deliver. So a predictable pipeline. As I said earlier, immersion into the product.
Yeah.
You need to know the product, right? People can easily
Mm,
tell if you don't know what you're talking about. This is me as a sales engineer as well. People do call you out on it, of course. The space we're selling into, as I said, like your total addressable market, the verticals, the personas you're selling into, kind of inherently understanding that. And then also the stakeholders, right? So internal and external. You're selling
mm,
everything, right? You're selling in every direction is the way I look at it, right? So I'm selling externally to a prospect, as we spoke about, customer success, implementation, etc. I'm selling internally to them as well, because ultimately customer, or like customer success, account management success, as it were, is based on renewals, right? It's based on retaining business.
yeah.
So ensuring that you're also like kind of setting them up for success as well. So you're kind of the fulcrum of the organization moving. Obviously, you're bringing in revenue. There's just understanding the responsibility that you have, I think, to the organization that you work for, as well as the organization you're selling into.
Mm,
Once you understand that, I think it's a case of understanding what works for you. We touched on it earlier. There's like lots of like traditional training methods out there, qualification methods, but also the beauty of accidentally falling into sales, or kind of like learning on the job and being agile behind that. I
yeah.
think identifying what works for you is crucial. I worked across like MedPick, obviously the qualification, command of message, and there are elements of that work for me, particularly as a sales engineer, right? Elements that work
Mm,
for me, elements that are irrelevant to me to a large degree, elements that I kind of need to do my day to day as well. So getting that kind of like balance between, again, that personal side of the fence, and also it's kind of like the quantitative and qualitative, right? Because you don't want to sit there with a
mm,
kind of clipboard and be like, what is your inherent pain? What is the process? You know, who is the decision maker? Because then
Yeah.
you might as well just be a chatbot, right, on a landing page. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's about the nuance behind that, I would suggest. Understanding the qualification, you know, your qualification methodology, because going back to the responsibility that you have for your
Mm,
organization and for the customer you're selling into. And without that, you kind of, as I said, you become almost like a chatbot to a large degree, right? It's about the nuance and the kind of flair maybe behind that as well.
okay. And obviously with the world of tech and AI and stuff rising now, like people are going to be looking at their sales process and look at, okay, well, what is a mundane task or admin task that we could automate or get, it done? It almost becomes that they look at their whole process to try and get everything automated or some form of tech to do it for them, which in a way, yes, could become lazy, fine, get it, but that then takes away from sharpening your own skills of doing the
Mm-hmm.
job. So the way I see like AI and stuff like is bolting onto it. It's not necessarily replacing. You still need the core fundamentals, what you talked about, immersion, understand what works for you, understand the market, building that pipeline. But yeah, I think if AI and bots and stuff like that can help you,
Mm-hmm.
but I think you got to take a step back and go, right, is this replacing like what I'm doing, like a skill that I really need to learn and be
Mm-hmm.
on top of? Because otherwise, you get into a point where you're just clicking buttons and let that go, and then I think if you're not doing something constantly, like you'll lose that skill.
Yeah, yeah.
Interest.
There's two things that spring to mind from that.
Hmm,
I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago, was it Google? I think had this like catastrophic outage, right? So
right.
no one could search for anything. If you had any Google Home devices, you weren't able to turn your lights on, right? You couldn't you couldn't like use any of the Google Home stuff. So within
Right.
that, it demonstrates that you do still need that manual process on top of it because otherwise
Mm,
you're a bit kind of like screwed without it to a large degree.
mm,
And I got this really cringy phrase I use sometimes when it comes to AI, which I do throw it out sometimes in demos. So any more prospects that maybe watching this will know this. But there's AI, so artificial intelligence, but there's also AI, which is actual intelligence. And I think you need
mm,
like, a mixture of the two, if that makes sense, in order to kind of like optimize kind of AI, because it is fantastic, right? The stuff it can do for you,
yeah.
it can automate kind of slightly mundane tasks. It can produce an email draft for you when you're kind of like maybe bereft for any kind of inspiration. But again, when you start to rely on it and it goes wrong or there's an outage, you can't turn your lights on, so you can't do the basic things, right?
That's it. And don't get me wrong, I've got tech that I use that helps me formulate a process from going out to people, right? So as human beings, we're naturally flawed at forgetting unless we're super structured, super like every hour and what we need to do and follow ups and stuff like that. So what I've got is a company called Sourcewell, not plugging them, but whatever. um, and that will allow me to create a 12 step process from I'll write the email, it will go out, then it will notify me, right, call this person, it's been 3 days, right,
Mm.
this person haven't got through to them. Next 2 3 days later, right, send them another email, or add them on LinkedIn. And it's basically a process that's basically aligned. I'm still doing all the work, but it's keeping me on track and not
Nice.
forgetting. Because if I'm going out to hundreds of thousands, then I think that's where then people are just like, oh crap, I haven't phoned that
Yeah,
person in 4 months, and it's just,
yeah,
do you know what I
yeah.
mean? So I think that's where tech and AI and stuff like that can really bolt on and help you keep on top of your lead generation, your business development, or whatever it may be. But
I agree.
do you think it's because of the times that we're living in right now, in terms of people potentially getting lazy or just switching over to tech and clicking that on? Do you think it's like people are seeing the competitors doing the same and they want to keep up to it, or
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess you run the risk of sounding a bit like a luddite if you talk like that, right? So technology, we work in technology, right? We sell technology, so we can't
mm,
be afraid of it. We that's
yeah,
uh, that's not a good look for us.
no,
But yeah, I think to a large degree, it's kind of like as I mentioned earlier, it's the artful way of using that technology. So the
mm,
first time the telephone was, some people started to use the telephone to cold call or sell things, right? It was should you do that, or should you go and knock on someone's door or go to someone's office, right?
Mm.
Is that a lazy way of behaving? The first time emails came about, right, we're not sending
Yeah.
letters or memos, we are sending electronic communication. So is
Mm.
this an evolution of the marketplace, the world as a whole?
Yeah.
But again, it's kind of like making sure that you still have that personal touch and you still understand why you're doing it, as opposed to just going through the motions to actually do it, if that makes sense. And it's an interesting point you made about competitors, because I think, again, with the market saturation, it is kind of like you have to follow the leaders potentially in order to survive in the marketplace.
Mm.
Understanding the degree on which you want to kind of like be a follower, be a leader, or a mixture of the two, I guess. And that's from a product perspective, and also from a sales flow perspective as well.
Yeah, I remember you just sparked a memory. I watched another podcast. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was talking about if you're sitting there and you're analyzing your competitors and your competitors are doing X, and then you try and go do X, you're already probably
Behind the
three,
game.
6 months behind the game,
Mhm.
right? Because they put time, effort in a budget, they planned it out, and then by the time you go to do it, they're probably onto something else. So it's kind of like, yes, keep an eye on your competitors, but also keep an eye on. I think if you can really listen to your customers and
Yeah,
what they want, that's going to be able to drive the direction of your business of what's going to, and talk to them. Cool. Hey, by the way, Mister CEO or Miss CEO, um, throughout our process, we used a lot of tech to reach out to you. Like, how did you find it? Did you realize it was tech? Did you realize
yeah,
it
yeah,
was not a human? Or ask these questions to get like raw data, so then they can say, actually, yeah, I knew it was automated. Or how did it make you feel? Like, did it put us down a bit? Did it put us up a bit? Obviously, you bought, so obviously, what we do is great for you. But in terms of the process, getting that raw data and listening to your customers about how they feel, I think that will help shape the next step for you, which is interesting. Yeah.
I agree, and I think it kind of that's a really good point that you raised. I think it kind of relates to some other stuff we were talking about earlier, where what it takes to become a good salesperson, quote unquote.
Mm,
Um, and I think retrospectives are key, right? So I think having a retro for a good or a bad purpose is essential. You have to understand where success has come from, where potentially
mm,
failure has come from, and not be scared of either. Blameless cultures, I'm a big fan of. I think it's everyone's philosophy, it's everyone's purpose to sell products, make a customer
mm,
happy, retain a customer as well. And that's not just sales, it's not just support, it's not just CSMs, for example. It's everyone within the organization. And
mm.
that's a philosophy that I do truly believe in, because I think if you're all driving towards the same goal, I think it becomes a lot, I wouldn't say easier, but a lot less resistant together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I guess that comes down to structure and internally people knowing what they need to do and come together with that one direction in terms of the goal that everyone's moving to. I guess
Mhm.
also it's like connecting the dots, right?
Yeah.
Throughout the sales process about I guess really understanding who your ICP is, but like why are people actually in the meeting?
Hmm.
Um, I feel that I've definitely been in meetings before where got the right prospect. It's
Hmm.
not the right person. Um, do you feel that that comes down to training? Then do you feel that comes down to because again, and the reason why I'm asking is a lot of people, if we're talking about value and pushing numbers and hitting targets and stuff. Like yes, the business needs money in the bank. However, from a sales perspective, I think someone coming into the game, years experience, they do need probably 3 to 6 months to really get going.
Hmm.
And I have saw multiple times, like in the market, where people are joining and after 3 months, if they're not necessarily hitting targets, they're being let go.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think it does come down to people really connect the dots straight away and understanding, and does it come from their own drive?
So like if connecting the dots, I think is there's different ways of looking at it, right? So we're talking about from an onboarding perspective right here. So I 100% agree with you. I think a minimum of 6 months in order to ramp up. It's particularly in sales, right? So I've had lots of different roles within the sales cycle. So customer success, sales engineer, support as well. So from a support perspective, it's more kind of qualitative, right? It's here's the issues that you're receiving, here's the documentation how to resolve it. You can use previous experience in order to to drive to the resolution, but typically is I would say it's a bit quicker to get up and running like within that kind of quantitative approach. With sales though, for example, there's a lot of moving pieces again. So you could have a new kind of space that you're working in terms of product, in terms of vertical, new client base, new customer base, new personas that you're trying to work within. You also have to learn the product as well. As I said earlier, you need to be able to talk about the product with authority. I never think it's good that first week you just throw someone on a call just to see how they get on, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's almost like there was infinite monkeys and infinite typewriters to make Shakespeare. So you need to actually kind of put a lot of time and energy and effort into understanding what you're selling and how you're selling it. And obviously a big part of that is connecting the dots. So that is, as I was saying earlier, like the product, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders. Also a case of just logging into everything, I guess, as well, right? With the, as we were talking about, the kind of technology that you have at your disposal now, you've got different licenses you need to be trained on some of these new tools, for example, as well. Identify your patch that you're working on as well, the geographies, the verticals, the industries. So yeah, I think it is a bit unfair to start expecting results immediately from salespeople.
There's definitely there's a lot to learn, especially in sales. From you just mentioned the product, the ICP, everything, the pain points, all that. Then you've got the EQ, the empathy they have to get involved with and go through the process of demonstrating that throughout, and then they got to hit numbers and do the activity. So it is a tough gig. It's obviously
Yeah.
not for everyone, but it's fun and exciting. And I think the rewards in sales far outweigh bad days. I've had bad days, running my business,
Mhm.
but every day's a new day. I'm not going to let me affect my energy and push me down a path I don't really want to go. And then there's days like yesterday where stuff comes through and you're just like, yes, let's go.
Yeah.
So it's awesome. But listen,
Nice.
you give really good, thought provoking answers and I guess opinions on the art of sales. Is it lost around EQ, empathy, value driven, what people should be doing, and what really makes a good salesperson. So I really appreciate your knowledge and your viewpoints on that. But I guess just to wrap up the show, um, you've been in sales for quite some time. So what would you say throughout your whole career? Like what's been the biggest highlight so far that you would
Well, I'm still waiting on it, so I think no, I'm
say?
joking. I think it's an evolution, right? So again, I think you're never done learning, you're never done understanding what you do. I think if you think you know everything, you don't know anything, right?
Mm,
So when I first started, it was closing big deals with like big organizations, big names,
mm,
being in the room with important people, kind of like important senior people. And I think back to a meme that I saw once. It was like when I was, in college or university, I wanted to be in the meetings, right? I was thinking about, oh, I'm going to be invited to this meeting and sit there and contribute. And then once you get to a certain age or tenure, you're like, I will do anything not to be in these meetings, right? Like, do you know what I mean? So kind of like your perspective flips, I think. And the more kind of like, the more I work within this kind of like industry or realm, as it were, I suppose my highlights become less tangible on like on a CRM. So it's not like
mm,
big deal closed, big meeting conducted, good feedback or whatever. It's think back to the people that you've helped, I guess. So
mm,
as a leader, you kind of pride yourself on kind of upskilling people, helping people achieve their goals. So people that wanted to step into sales engineering, people that were SDRs, BDRs, that wanted to become AEs, people that wanted to become senior AE, step into management, for example. And when those people reach out to you for like advice or guidance, or you see them actually, you see them achieve their goal, that gives me a lot
mm.
more of a warm feeling, I suppose, than closing a big deal until payday,
Love
I
that.
guess. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that. But then also, no, I think that's probably the best way to look at it.
Yeah, I love that. I'm slightly similar with, one of the big things from a self-satisfaction point of view is seeing other people doing well, and really trying to highlight to people because from a young age, I was told I can't do stuff and you're not good
Yeah,
enough and you're not smart enough. And, I've proven all those people wrong that did say that. And, from a guess a psychology point of view, people coming into a sales team is really uh, offloading sort of your experience on someone so that when they get it and they do the deals, you see the excitement that has I've been a part of that person's
yeah,
career
right.
growth, their learning. And I think you can't get away from watching other people doing well. And I guess it's human nature, right? We love helping people. We love, seeing people do well, which is awesome. So accolade to you. So I guess just to wrap up the show then, for people listening to this and want to reach out to you, feel free to plug in the business, who you guys are, what you guys do. Um, if you're hiring for salespeople right now, how should they contact you? And yeah, feel free to plug
Sure, thank you. I guess this is where I fumble the elevator pitch.
in. Don't fumble. Don't fumble.
But no, so I'm obviously global head of sales engineering at Customer Gauge. We are a VOC B2B focused product. So we focus across obviously lots of different verticals. The idea being that, as we were talking about earlier, customer retention, customer loyalty is key to understanding, your customer base, your install base, but crucially to how people keep renewing subscriptions, right? And that is not just SaaS, that is across the marketplace, right? Across lots of different verticals. So Customer Gauge has an interesting philosophy called account experience, which is kind of you treat the whole account as a whole. So you obviously have lots of different kind of contacts within your account base, and it's about kind of reaching out to those individuals with short targeted surveys, be it NPS, CSAT, CES kind of focused, and then receiving targeted responses and feedback from those individuals around the customer journey, right? So you understand intimately what each type of customer that you have, the kind of perception they have of your organization or of your journey. We then crucially layer that over onto revenue as well. So you can see side by side customer sentiment in relation to the revenue that you have, from each account, helping you determine where you can move the dial, where you can actually impact your balance sheet in a positive fashion. All automated. I know we were talking about a lot of automation tools earlier, how they can make your life easier. This is all automated. Obviously, the kind of feedback you receive from that is fairly invaluable. Well, very invaluable, I should say. But yeah, in terms of the organization, we have a few roles open now, like focused on customer success. So jump onto customergauge.com is always a good place to start to look at, obviously, for more information about the organization and then also those roles. Also, feel free to contact me directly over LinkedIn, or matt.champion@customergauge.com is also where you can find me.
And you didn't fumble that elevator pitch, mate. That's awesome. You nailed it. Nailed it.
It might not be accurate. You never know.
That's it. Cool. I'll put your the website and everything into the comment section and stuff so people can reach out to you. But listen, really appreciate your time and your insights today. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure being here.
What an episode there with Matt. Absolutely love that. His viewpoints, his opinions on is the art of sales lost. And I believe there's definitely elements of it that are being transferred across to technology to do stuff for us. And if you really think about it, does that really help you progress being a salesperson? Right. So we talked about the EQ, the empathy, the personal side of things. We also talked about the value driven, really understand your ICP and what your product or software actually does. And if you think about what he said about being a good salesperson around predictable business to pipeline. Also, the immersion of the product. You have to really understand what you're selling, who you're selling to, the stakeholders, internal and external. And understand also what works for you because every salesperson is a bit different. They've got strengths and areas of improvement. So really understand what the opportunity is that you're selling, the value, the process, and not necessarily become lazy, right? Don't just switch off and be like, oh, tech and everything else will do it for me. If you really want to be a tip top salesperson, it's about looking at areas for development and actioning that to be the best you can be. So, hope you enjoyed this session with Matt. I absolutely loved it, and I will see you all on the next